in your garden so you can get outside.
Nice.
Yeah.
And apparently cats live longer too, don't they?
They do. They're more healthy.
Yeah,
do they? Healthy, and they don't get diseases from other cats. They don't get hit by cars. They don't. All those unfortunate things that happen to cats when they roam don't happen to indoor cats. And so, you do get to keep your pet for a bit longer.
Yolanda, George says Australia has a plethora of other local and introduced predators to control rodent populations. We'll just have a rat plague.
Yeah, well, this is the argument, but we don't know for sure. And of course, we need to be controlling rats at the same time. It's actually quite it's quite complicated. There was a study done in the United States where people compared a place as like an area where they saw rats. And what they found was that having cats around didn't affect the rat numbers, but it affected the rat behaviour. So they just became more vigilant and they stayed out of sight. But if you took cats away, then the rats actually, they didn't increase in numbers, but they just became much more bold, and so you saw them more often. So people thought that there were more rats around, but there weren't. It was just that the rats weren't frightened to come out.
Good heavens!
And so it's actually really difficult to know what would happen. But of course we need to be controlling rats, and that is happening.
Okay, briefly, bells on cats.
Bells on cats. They do cut the rate of captures back. One of my students did a study and it was reduced by about 50%, but a lot of cats get very sneaky about the bells that they're wearing. They either get rid of them or they find ways of moving where the bell doesn't really make much of a sound.
Also, I mean, like that would drive you mad, wouldn't it? Just think about what that would be like, just having a little bell just going. It would really drive you mad.
I wouldn't like to do it, but another thing that you can do is wear these kind of bright coloured collars that it's like a little collar with a scrunchie for those women who were in the scrunchy generation.
That was me.
They're just sort of bright, and so animals that like lizards and birds can actually see the cat coming.
Oh. So what advice would you give to Jared's two little predators?
To fit them out in lovely little scrunchy collars.
So undignified.
Dye them pink.
Yeah, well, you can accessorise depending on the mood.
Now, this is my idea of a good time.
But then maybe when his two little predators have got old and he's looking at maybe getting another cat, then to think about having a cat that's a completely indoors cat.
Yeah, bravo to that. I think that's it. I think we've got to change behaviour now, and I would do that actually. I think there are numerous reasons to do it. I mean, I just feel terrible for my, and I think it's quite selfish actually, but nevertheless that's the way it is. But I certainly do believe in changing the behaviour of cat owners. I genuinely do.
Also, if they're inside, you're going to have to get a litter box, and then that's gross. I mean, I think it's what has to happen, but that's why we don't want a dog. You're just like a portable poo picker upper when you get a dog, and it's a bit like that with a cat.
There's all that. Associate Professor Yolanda van Heesen, thank you very much for your time there. Regarding driving, someone says here, 38-year-old female, stick shift all the way. I always had a flat battery living in Wellington, poor student. Crash starting my car on the hills became the norm for me. And someone says, automatic cars are not more dangerous. My car is fully manual, but I pay a lot less attention on the road than most people. You have all been warned. From speedy North Shore Subaru driver.
Right, okay.
You've been wonderful, both of you. Hey, Jared, thank you very much for being on the panel.
Yay, congratulations.
Lovely to be here.
Yes, I hope you come again. And Penny Ashton, thank you as well.
Ka kite anō on the New Zealand accent.
Good on you. See you later.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, New Zealanders kicked out of Oz for committing crimes there are racking up even more here, including sex and violence offences. Striking junior doctors are demanding the Health Minister step in and sort out their employment stoush. It'll take months to catch up on the thousands of surgeries and appointments postponed due to the 5-day strike. The small community of Tokoroa mourns the death of 7 people from the same family killed in a horror road smash. The rabbi in California who came face to face with a gunman says luck and a quick-thinking worshipper probably saved his life. And it appears there is such a thing as a free lunch, at least at one of our high schools.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Neighbours and 3 schools in Tokoroa are mourning the loss of a local family following yesterday's road smash on State Highway 1 in which 8 people died. One man says the victims were a lovely and very polite family with young children that lived next door to him. Ivan Myers says the couple and their 7 children, some of them preschoolers, moved to the town just a few months ago.
Nice people, very nice, very friendly. We often, when we was hanging the washing or when I walked out to the road to the post box and she was there, we always had a bit of a yep, you know, yeah. And when in the school holidays too, the kids around the place there, you wouldn't think there was kids there, so well behaved.
The Tokoroa primary, intermediate and high schools have confirmed their pupils were involved in the crash. They say it's a tragic accident that has affected the whole community. The names of those who died have not been released by the police or the schools. 7 people died in one vehicle, as did the sole occupant of the other, who has been confirmed as a long-time Scouts New Zealand staff member. Striking junior doctors in Dunedin are demanding the Health Minister step in and sort out their row with their employers. The doctors today began a 5-day strike everywhere except Christchurch, the 5th and longest in a series of strikes since January. A Dunedin delegate for the Resident Doctors Association, Paediatric Registrar James Anderson, says David Clark must step in.
So he's been contacted in the past and he's said up until now that this is none of his business, and so what we're trying to do now is tell him today this is his business and that he needs to control his DHBs. James Anderson. Junior doctors also say the latest strike is needed to ensure a resolution is reached in urgent facilitation in 10 days' time. A company which handles home and contents insurance for almost half of New Zealanders say it is impossible to predict how much premiums might increase when it moves to a risk-based pricing model in July, but says some will be substantial. New legislation coming into effect in July will see the Earthquake Commission increase its cover on residential homes up to $150,000, but it will no longer cover contents. IAG's customer and consumer spokesperson Kevin Hughes says the company needs to account for those EQC changes, and people living in areas which are more prone to natural disasters and severe weather events will end up paying more.
For most customers, this will not be a major issue. There will be either a small or moderate increase or a small or moderate decline, but obviously for areas of higher risk and for areas which are considered to be very low risk, those changes will be more significant. But as you get with any change like this, there will be some extremes.
Kevin Hughes says customers will be advised of the changes as their premiums come up for renewal. The police in South Auckland have been increasing their visibility amid recent gang tension in the area. On Saturday, 39-year-old Agustino Tau appeared in the Manukau District Court, charged with the attempted murder of Killabee's gang president Josh Masters. Inspector Max Surhoy says officers are carrying out a number of enforcement and prevention activities in response to rising tension. He says anyone who is aware of gang-related activity should phone the police. The Northland DHB says the first 2 cases of measles that have been registered there is within their expectation, given what's happening across the country and overseas. An 11-year-old visitor to Northland from Auckland has been diagnosed, and a 14-month-old from Australia is suspected to have the disease. Virginia McLaughlin from the Northland DHB says they're very concerned and will keep a close eye on the nearly 50 people known to have been potentially exposed.
I think people may have forgotten just how serious measles is. We need to remember this is a highly infectious and really severe infection. People can die from measles. People can get very severe complications.
Dr McLaughlin says the disease can be easily prevented by routine vaccination, and she urges people to have one. A 19-year-old man accused of opening fire on Sabbath worshippers in a deadly shooting rampage at a Southern Californian synagogue is believed to have acted alone without help from any organised group. The gunman, walking into the suburban San Diego synagogue on the last day of the week-long Jewish holiday of Passover, and killed 1 woman and wounded 3 others inside using an assault-style rifle. John Ernest then fled in a car before calling police to hand himself in. The suspect, who is also under investigation for a mosque arson, has been charged with 1 count of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. A sudden heavy downpour has caused flooding on multiple roads around Christchurch this afternoon. Motorists are being urged to take extra care. The worst of the weather is forecast to blow over early this evening. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. 6 months ago, Football Ferns player Hannah Wilkinson thought she'd not only blown her knee but also any chance of playing at the World Cup in France in June. Wilkinson tore knee ligaments while playing for her Swedish club in October and all but gave up on any chance of playing in her third World Cup. Today, though, the 26-year-old striker was named in the Football Ferns 23-strong squad, although she admits the road to recovery hasn't been easy.
My mentality, from the get-go, was just to focus every day and not really think about, I had a doubt coming from all areas, and so that was a real test to really listen to my inner self and my inner belief and just work every day. And, within month after month, I saw the progress, and then suddenly it came 5 months and I was looking pretty good to be on track.
The Football Ferns opening World Cup match is against the Netherlands on June 12th. The Brisbane halfback Cody Nikorima could be a Warriors player by the weekend. The Courier Mail has reported the Warriors are seeking the services of Nikorima after a groin injury to veteran Blake Green exposed their lack of playmaking depth. The 13-test Kiwi could line up for the Warriors against Newcastle on Sunday. New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has suffered another disappointing result at her latest LPGA event, finishing tied for 42nd, 15 shots behind the winner at the Los Angeles Open. That's the news.
Crossing the line.
At this stage, it looks like the northbound vehicle, which was the Honda Odyssey vehicle, has crossed the centre line.
Holding the line.
So you can't even say you're trusted?
I trust my colleagues.
Do you trust Judith Collins?
I trust my colleagues.
And towing the line.
We know they're not very far away, and if people are listening to this program, I would urge them to hand them in. They're probably too hot to handle, I think.
On air and online. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, where to put 300 Queenstown Holiday Park residents in the way of $1 billion commercial, residential and hotel development. And after 10, British author Sonia Purnell on how extraordinary wartime spy Virginia Hall, also known as the Limping Lady, eluded the Nazis. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taumaranui and Taupo. Showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms in Waikato and Waitomo, clearing in most places overnight. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but showers spreading north overnight tonight. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa. Showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Southerly gales this evening, gusting to 100 kilometres an hour in Wellington and Wairarapa. Showers and strong southerlies easing tomorrow. For Nelson, Bulla and Westland, remaining showers clearing this evening and becoming fine. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain and southerly gales with snow to 900 metres, clearing in most places overnight. For Fiordland, Otago and Southland, showers with snow to 800 metres, retreating to the south coast tomorrow morning. Fine in western Fiordland. Chatham Islands, periods of rain, easing to showers tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna, and this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Reoffending rates by New Zealanders being deported back here from Australia are on the rise, with violent assaults and sex offences among the crimes committed by those coming home. Official figures released to Checkpoint show more than 40% of the nearly 1,700 people deported from Australia since January 2015 have been charged with an offence since returning here. But with the limited support available for deportees, those being sent home say it's totally predictable that they're returning to a life of crime. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Deportees are continuing to pour back into New Zealand following a change to Section 501 of Australia's Migration Act, which means all non-citizens who fail a character test are sent home. Those people are often referred to as 501s, and of the nearly 1,700 who have been sent home since the start of 2015, nearly 1/3 have been convicted of crimes in New Zealand. That's up from 25% in 2017 and 21% at the end of 2016. Anthony Miller had been living in Australia for 14 years when he was jailed on drug charges in 2013. He was kicked out of his adopted home in 2016 and says it's been a huge struggle.
Mate, it was terrible. The feeling when you walk off the plane is not good. You feel free, but you're not. There's no one here, and it's not a good feeling at all. Like if you're doing 2 prison sentences, basically. Like you're doing, I've already done one, and then I got pretty much life sentence again coming here.
Miller says he arrived in Auckland and was given $700 and a week's accommodation on Queen Street.
When your week's up, what do you think's going to, if you're in a bad headspace, what do you think's going to, you put a man in a cage, what do you think's going to happen to him? You're going to react. So that's probably why the crime has gone up, because these guys are scared and don't know where to live, or they've got nowhere to live or got no one.
Miller says he knows plenty of 501s who have committed crimes since they got back. Figures released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act show that 900 have been charged with violence, 1,300 with dishonesty charges. There have been nearly 1,000 traffic charges, 650 drugs charges and 63 sexual charges. Jail sentences have been handed down to 77 people. Support for returning 501 deportees is provided by the not-for-profit groups PARS and the Salvation Army. Glenn Buckner is the Salvation Army's National Operations Manager for Reintegration. He says he's surprised at how high the reoffending rates of 501s are.
I don't believe any of our 501s are coming over here with the attitude that they're going to reoffend in New Zealand, because some of them have been living quite successful lives in the community over in Australia without getting into trouble. I think, it is just the pressures, and they don't know the resources and the connections that they could be utilising. So some of them are making some choices that are probably unsuitable for themselves and our community.
PARS has worked with more than 500 deportees since 2015. The number of clients more than doubled last year, jumping from 140 to 295. The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, refused to be interviewed for the story, but said in a statement that the recidivism rate is comparable, in some cases lower, to that of offenders released from New Zealand prisons. The Corrections Minister, Calvin Davis, also refused to be interviewed, despite telling Checkpoint in 2016, when he was an opposition MP, that a lack of support left many 501s vulnerable.
They've got no job, they've got no roof over their head. If they don't get the right sort of social support, then they may have to resort to crime to get by. So these people are in a dire situation, and if it backfires, it's going to be New Zealanders who are going to be the victims of their crime.
More than 200 more 501 deportees are expected to arrive back in New Zealand before the end of the year. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blakeperson, TNA.
Striking junior doctors are demanding that the Health Minister step in and sort out their deep employment row. Thousands of junior doctors walked off wards today in a protracted dispute with the district health boards about who should control changes to rosters and other workplace practices. The doctors walked out of every public hospital except in Canterbury, which was exempted because of the mosque shootings. With more, here's our health correspondent Karen Brown.
About 30 junior doctors in Dunedin picketed outside the office of the Health Minister David Clark today, demanding he get involved in the row with their bosses. A Resident Doctors Association delegate, James Anderson, says their message is clear: the Minister needs to listen to them, and soon.
We've been bargaining with the district health boards for the last 12 months, trying to get to a point where we can settle our agreement, our MECA, and we're not getting to that point. The DHBs are insistent on taking away protections in our contract and taking away our rights to come to agreement about how we work, where we work and when we work.
Dr Anderson added the Health Minister has been careful to stay out of the employment dispute, but that's no longer acceptable.
So he's been contacted in the past, and he's said up until now that this is none of his business, and so what we're trying to do now is tell him today this is his business and that he needs to control his DHBs.
He was backed by the union president Courtney Brown, who says doctors are striking for a fifth time to protect current provisions of their now expired employment agreement. She says strikes will continue until that's achieved, adding action is needed to ensure upcoming facilitation through the Employment Relations Authority ends the dispute.
Those 4 strikes have gotten us to a point now where we are going to facilitation, and the point of this 5th strike is to try and ensure that we get a settlement at the end of that process.
Capital and Coast DHB wouldn't allow Checkpoint to go into Wellington Regional Hospital to see how it was managing today. But its Chief Medical Officer, John Tate, reported the day has gone well, with more junior doctors turning up to work than expected, especially relatively senior registrars. He was unable to give exact figures, but says union members turned up, along with members of the Stones Union and doctors not in either union.
We weren't expecting anybody from oncology, and we had at least 2 or 3. Medical registrars, we normally run on 19, and with non-members of the RDA, we've got 10 of those working, and most of the surgical and women's health registrars are working as well.
Wellington Hospital rescheduled all non-urgent surgery apart from cancer surgery this week, along with most clinics, but it may be able to reconsider that if more doctors than expected continue to turn up for work. Dr Tate adds his main concern, however, is whether staff, including senior doctors or SMOs who are filling in for others, can keep it up for the 5 days.
If you've been an SMO and then you're having to work as a registrar, it's not like for like. So there is this stress of doing things that you're slightly uncomfortable doing, but knowing that you'll do them well. Now, that's always been sustainable for 2 days, 3 days. Whether it's sustainable for 5 days is something when you ask me what worries me, that's what worries me.
He adds it won't affect patient safety, but it will make for a highly stressed workforce. Catching up on postponed surgeries would also take considerable time and add to stress levels. The DHB's National Contingency Planner, Anne Aitchison, is well aware of that.
That varies from District Health Board to District Health Board, but it will take months. Each DHB does things differently. There will be extra surgical sessions run, there will be extra clinics run in order to assist with the recovery.
In the meantime, hospitals around the country have their sights set on 8 o'clock on Saturday morning when this strike is due to end. Mo te hotaka o te ahi, ko Karen Brown, tēnei.
A Tokoroa man says the victims of a horror crash north of Taupo were a family with young children that lived next door to him. 3 Tokoroa schools have confirmed its pupils were involved in yesterday's crash, the local primary, intermediate and high school. 7 people died in a people mover and another person died in an SUV in the crash. Our reporter Andrew McRae has been in Tokoroa and filed this report.
The family home down a quiet Tokoroa street is deserted. The blinds are down as they were when the family went away. The family hadn't lived in the house long. A neighbour, Ivan Myers, says the couple and their 7 children, some as young as preschoolers, moved to Tokoroa just a few months ago. The 89-year-old's been in the town for 40 years. He says they were all lovely people, and the woman said she and her partner were planning to get married next month.
Nice people, very nice, very friendly. We often, when we was hanging the washing or when I walked out to the road to the post box and she was there, we always had a bit of a yep, you know, yeah. And when in the school holidays too, the kids around the place there, you wouldn't think there was kids there, so well behaved. When they told me this morning, I cried.
Mr. Myers says he started to think something might be wrong when he saw the home's curtains were still closed this morning and had been all weekend. He says when he saw 7 children move in, he thought it would be chaos, but it was nothing like that.
You know, and then the kids came outside and there was a little boy there, and that is the one who's in hospital, I think, 9 years. And he was a nice, very, very polite kid, nice kids. And I said to him, I said, do you mow lawns? He said, yes. I said, I might get you to mow my lawn. It can make you a bit of pocket money.
He says the father worked in the dairy industry, but he hadn't spoken to him much. 3 schools in Tokoroa have confirmed their pupils are involved in the crash. The schools are Tokoroa North Primary School, Tokoroa Intermediate and Tokoroa High School. A short joint written statement from them says it's a tragic accident that's affected the whole community.
We can confirm students from our schools have been involved, but we cannot confirm names as they've yet to be released by the police. We're currently putting systems in place to support our staff, our students and their whānau, and this is our priority at this time.
The sole occupant of the second vehicle, an SUV, was a woman who worked for Scouts New Zealand. She'd been at a work-related dinner in Waitomo on Saturday night and was travelling from Hamilton to Taupo to meet with a senior volunteer before heading to Palmerston North. Scouts New Zealand put out a statement earlier today.
We're committed to supporting her family as best we can given the sudden and tragic circumstances. We also extend our support and have offered counselling to our staff and volunteer community, many of whom worked closely with the employee during her long tenure with Scouts.
The Mayor of the South Waikato District, Jenny Shattuck, says the effect of the loss will be widely felt in the small town.
It's such a tragedy, and our community in Tokoroa is a small community, but it's a strong and it's a caring community. So this horrendous tragedy is just awful, and it will affect an awful lot of people in Tokoroa.
The sole survivor of the crash, a 9-year-old boy, is in a stable condition in Waikato Hospital, surrounded by extended whānau. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, we are keen to hear from you. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A rabbi has recalled the moment he came face to face with the gunman who stormed a synagogue in California over the weekend. Yisrael Goldstein was wounded in the shootings, which killed one person and injured 3 others as worshippers gathered for Passover in Poway, San Diego. Today, he told reporters that he survived because of a mix of luck and preparation for such an attack. He described the moments leading up to the shooting.
And here we are in the lobby on one of the holiest days of the year, the last day of Passover, smiling at each other. And I walk into the banquet hall to wash my hands. I walk 2-3 footsteps when I hear a loud bang. I turn around and I see a sight that undescribable. Here is a young man standing with a rifle, pointing right at me. I took a look and more shots came running right at me, and I lifted up my hands. I lost my index finger on this hand after 4 hours of surgery yesterday to trying to save the index finger on the left hand. I turned around and I saw the children that were playing in the banquet hall. I ran to gather them together. My granddaughter, 4.5 years old, sees her grandpa with a bleeding hand, and she sees me screaming and shouting, "Get out, get out!" Just miraculously, the gun jammed. And in attendance at the synagogue, there was a Border Patrol off-duty agent, Mr. Jonathan Morales, who recently discovered his Jewish roots. And many of times I'd say, "Jonathan, you work for the Border Patrol. Please arm yourself when you are here. We never know when we'll need it." As soon as the gun jammed and as soon as the shouting was going on, he jumped up in pursuit. Oscar Stewart, a former soldier, jumped into action. He tried to tackle down the gunman. The gunman just exited and ran away. My missing finger will forever scar me physically, but it's going to remind me how vulnerable we are and also how heroic each one of us can be. We're all created in God's image. We are all partners in creation. No matter what faith or religion you're from, we all have to make this world a better place to prevent this from ever happening again.
Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein. Meanwhile, police in California believe the 19-year-old accused of carrying out the shooting acted alone without help from any organised group. Police say the suspect, John Ernest, is now in custody after he gave himself up, citing the Christchurch mosque killings as inspiration for the attack. They're also investigating whether an anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim letter posted on a far-right notice board before the attack is genuine. The BBC's Sophie Long reports from Southern California.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. A community brought together in pain and multi-faith prayers for peace. They came to soothe each other's sadness and to pray for those suffering. For Laurie Gilbert Kay, who went to worship on a sunny Saturday morning and died hours later in hospital. For a child shot in the leg, and for 2 men, one a rabbi.
I've been going here my entire life, and to see all these wonderful people come together from all these faiths, it's just absolutely amazing. We had one person today full of hate, one person. And look at there's 1,000 people here tonight that are full of love. That is what it's about.
This is not the first time a tight-knit community like this one have come together to try to help each other other heal the wounds inflicted by a man with a gun. It's unlikely it'll be the last.
I'm hoping this does not become the new normal. Places of worship are sacred, human life is sacred, and just the idea of every time we have to keep responding to acts of hate and acts of terror is really traumatizing for the community.
Police have arrested a 19-year-old, John Ernest. They're now investigating what made a young man take an assault rifle, shoot a child, kill a woman and destroy lives in a place of peace and worship.
Sophie Long there from San Diego. The government's announced more funding for the census as Stats NZ front-foots the unprecedented delay in releasing data from 2018 survey. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced $16 million will go towards fixing the issues and preventing them happening again. Earlier today, Stats NZ announced it's now plugged the gaps caused by the underwhelming response to last year's mostly online census and would begin releasing details from September. Here's our political reporter, Yvette McCullough.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern still holds the previous government responsible for the problems with last year's census. She says Stats NZ has largely been able to rectify the situation.
It is, however, an experience that I would certainly not call an ideal scenario. And the problems the government inherited with this census are ones that we simply do not want repeated. The decision by the previous national government to shift New Zealand to a mostly online census, while expecting it to cut costs in doing so, clearly imposed pressures for the 2018 census.
$10 million will be to help Stats NZ prepare for the 2023 census and implement recommendations from the expert advisory group on last year's census. The responsible minister, James Shaw, says the additional $6 million is effectively backfill funding.
It's almost like adding an additional year onto the end, because what they've had to do to make up the 2018 census results is what they were planning to do for 2023, which was a much more integrated census data plus admin data. And so they've kind of had to do all of that development work essentially 4 years early.
It comes the same day Stats NZ explained the next steps in the already twice delayed release of Census 2018 data. Census data is used to update our official population estimates, with implications for many organisations' planning and, vitally, funding. Stats NZ says it now has a dataset of 4.7 million people that reaches the quality criteria for population structure information, made up of 89% census information and 11% of other government data. Government statistician Liz McPherson says this is based on solid maths, not guesswork.
Contrary to speculation, our extensive testing confirms that the combined 2018 census dataset is robust for electoral purposes. We are also confident in the robustness of the data we will be supplying to the Ministry of Health for their population-based funding model for DHBs.
However, she says this method of using government data to compensate isn't a silver bullet, and they're still working out the areas where the dataset will or won't be reliable.
Some census data will be judged as not of sufficient quality for release as official statistics. We will work through the implications of this with our customers as we confirm the data quality of each topic.
Issues with iwi affiliations data means it won't be included, with potential implications for pre-settlement iwi. It's also raising concerns about the quality of some household data. National Statistics spokesperson Zhang Yang says it's staggering that the first tranche of data is being released almost a year late.
So by the time they start releasing data and by the time they finish releasing data will be over 2 years. And by then, the data could be outdated already.
He says this failure is on Stats NZ and the current government.
This is a big shamble because the census was so poorly organized and executed. So that's a big challenge to the government, because government agencies really need census data for their budget.
A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister told reporters while they didn't have the final census, ministers had been given data sets in various portfolios as they finalised budget decisions. And Jacinda Ardern says they're taking action now to ensure these issues don't arise in Census 2023. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
On Checkpoint on RNZ National. Questions over Simon Bridges' leadership as National MPs return to Parliament after a 2-week break. Severe flooding in Montreal forces thousands to flee their homes. And how long will it take to catch up on the thousands of surgeries cancelled during this week's junior doctors' strikes? And the pilot program handing out free lunches to high school students in Lower Hutt. We would love to hear from you. Do send us your feedback, particularly interested in hearing from you. If you are a patient who's had an operation cancelled due to the strikes, how is this affecting you? You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. Time now, though, for the headlines with Susana Leotawa.
Tokoroa people are mourning the loss of a local family after yesterday's road smash on State Highway 1 in which 8 people died. One man says the victims were a lovely family with young children that lived next door to him. The town's primary, intermediate and high schools have confirmed their pupils were involved in the crash, which they say has affected the whole community. Striking junior doctors in Dunedin are demanding the Health Minister sort out their row with their employers. They've started a 5-day strike everywhere except Christchurch, the 5th and longest in a series this year. They say the latest strike is needed to ensure a resolution is reached in urgent facilitation in 10 days' time. The government has freed up an extra $16 million for Statistics New Zealand in the May budget in an effort to avoid problems with the next census in 2023. Statistics New Zealand has been under political pressure to deliver a complete and valid census from last year's data after moving it online. There have been unprecedented delays due to a low turnout in which nearly 1 in 7 people did not complete Census 2018. Statistics NZ will begin releasing data from last year on September 23rd. IAG, which handles home and contents insurance for almost half of New Zealanders, says it's impossible to predict the size of increases in premiums when it moves to a risk-based pricing model, but people living in vulnerable areas will pay more. Under new legislation taking effect in July, the Earthquake Commission will boost its cover on residential homes up to $150,000, but it will no longer cover contents. A spokesperson says the company needs to account for EQC changes, and people living in areas more prone to natural disasters will end up paying more. Reoffending rates by New Zealanders being deported here from Australia are on the rise, with violent assaults and sex offences among the crimes committed by those coming home. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks so much, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business news now with Kim Savage. Kim, we are going to get some kind of insight into what's happening with the labour market later this week, are we?
Yes, good evening, Lisa. Believe it or not, this is the kind of stuff that economists and business reporters, in fact, too, get quite excited about. So it's really just one of the kind of data sets, I guess, that we get that kind of gives us a bit of a sense of the health of the economy and how things are turning over. So what we're going to see come Wednesday are these job figures, which will tell us the unemployment rate for those first 3 months of the year, and also the number of jobs that have been created, just how that's tracking right now. So economists' views on this are somewhat mixed. Some economists believe that we'll see that unemployment rate tick up just slightly. Some think that it will remain stable after a bit of a rise at the end of last year, and then some think it will actually ease off a little bit. So there are all manner of views out there in the market at the moment. What everyone is keeping an eye out for is the wage growth and what that will look like. So the reason why that's so important is that what economists think they'll see is a modest lift in wage growth, and then that potentially could flow through to what we see with inflation, consumer price, and then that then flows through to what the Reserve Bank, for example, is thinking about the official cash rate and monetary policy, so what it might then do with that official cash rate when it meets next week. So a lot of factors at play here, and as I said, it's just one of those really key sort of data sets that we get that kind of tell us about the economy and what's going on, and will definitely feed into what we see with monetary policy from next week going onwards.
So cost of living, this is really interesting. Beneficiaries, you say, have seen their cost of living rise more than the overall population.
Yeah, and believe it or not, it's actually cigarettes, the cost of cigarettes, which are behind this, according to Stats New Zealand. So what we actually saw for the first quarter is that the cost of living for beneficiaries rose 0.6%, and that compares, if you're wanting to sort of have a comparison there, to 0.1% for all households altogether. what actually happened was in January, the excise tax for tobacco rose. That was the annual increase that took place. And actually, Stats New Zealand's issued quite a helpful figure here. They say that the cost of one cigarette now is $1.50, and that's about 54 cents more expensive than it was 10 years ago. So that excise increase year on year has created that 54-cent difference there. The reason beneficiaries have been hit the hardest by this is that their spending is made up by, more of their spending goes on cigarettes than it does for the overall population. So it has a more significant impact for them. Just another thing to note out of these statistics, the cost of living actually fell for higher spending households, and that was down to a drop in the international airfares and also the cost of petrol too. So those particular areas make up a higher proportion of spending for those higher spending households as well.
And the markets, what's been happening on the markets today, Kim?
The NZX Top 50 has closed up this afternoon at 10,013. It's up 0.2%, up 18 points. And just taking a quick look at the currencies, the dollar trading at 66.8 US and 94.6 Australian this afternoon.
Thanks, Kim. Kim Savage there with our business news. The Canadian city of Montreal is under a state of emergency and thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate due to widespread flooding. Heavy rains across the province of Quebec have pushed up river levels, and in some areas they have reached a 100-year high. The neighbouring provinces of Ontario and New Brunswick have also been hit hard, and more rain is on the way. From Montreal, the CBC's Justin Hayward has the story.
Raymond Boutin stands in the pouring rain on a suburban street in Laval, north of Montreal, and stares at the wall of sandbags around his house. Even with his neighbour's help, he says the effort nearly killed him, and nobody has had time to sleep. When it flooded in 2017, they said this would only happen again in 30 years, he says. It's only been 2. The water on the street is coming up so fast you can see it creeping along the pavement.
The water was all over the place in my basement.
Juliette Zuniga's house is closer to the river, already cut off by the floodwater. Some of her neighbours abandoned their homes after the last flood. Their houses still stand empty.
I don't know what to do. I want to sell the house, but now I cannot sell the house. So many people are like, oh no, I'm not buying that house. I don't want to be next to the lake.
She and her neighbours are also worried about the century-old dam upriver on the Rivière Rouge that's at risk of failing. If it does, Quebec's Transport Minister François Bonnardel says a wall of water more than 2.5 metres high will wash down the valley. Emergency personnel have helped some 60 people evacuate their homes below the dam and are asking 200 more to leave. Bruno Vanas was taken out by helicopter. If that dam lets go, he says, our home is pretty close to the water. I'm worried. That fear spreads across western Quebec, where swollen rivers are threatening homes in riverside towns and cities from the Laurentian Mountains to Lac Saint-Pierre, halfway down the St. Lawrence River from Montreal toward Quebec City. Part of one major highway is little more than a ribbon of asphalt, cutting through what looks like a lake where usually there are farmers' fields. In Rigaud, west of Montreal, a mandatory evacuation order is in place. Rigaud's fire chief, Daniel Boyer, is worried for residents who ignore the order, staying home to try to save their houses.
Each day, it's tougher and tougher on those people. They try to fight. It's been over a week right now, okay? Psychologically, you got to become in distress at one point.
With heavy rain falling, officials say water levels are likely to exceed what they were 2 years ago, sometime this weekend. That's what municipalities call a once-in-a-century flood for the second time in 2 years.
And emergency measures to ban people from covering their faces are coming into force in Sri Lanka. The country has been marking a week since Easter Sunday bomb attacks in which at least 250 people were killed. The attackers were Islamist extremists who targeted Christian worshippers in churches as well as people in some of Colombo's largest hotels. The BBC's Clive Myrie is in the Sri Lankan capital and has this report.
7 days ago, the devout gathered at St. Anthony's Church to mark the resurrection of Christ. Today, they gathered again, but this time with the army and police, a security cordon, and a sense of fear. Because the sounds of screams filled the church at 8:45 last Sunday morning. At 8:45 today, bells tolled for the dead. bombers may have killed and maimed, but they haven't diminished the devotion of worshippers to venerate their God, even out here on the streets. Here they espouse a kind humanity, the very notion dismissed by the bombers. But some have had a crisis of faith. Lighting a candle for his own family is Kanagalingam Regan. He just left the church with 2 of his sons when the suicide bomber struck. His wife, another son, and a baby daughter were still inside. I believed in God, he told me. But some in my family have no life. I pray to God he will heal them.
Yeah, these are the babies.
In all, 19 children ended up at this hospital after the bombings. Many others died. Diduni is 5 years old. Her brother and grandmother are dead at the hands of one of the suicide bombers. Her throat, badly scarred by the blast, will recover. But how scarred is her mind? She still hasn't been told. Her relatives are dead. Zahran Hashim, the alleged mastermind behind senseless murder. Hashim died blowing up a hotel, while his father and 2 brothers, co-conspirators, are now dead after a police raid. Today we were allowed inside the still damaged St. Anthony's Church. Members of the Sri Lankan Navy tried to clean away the stain of violence to restore this house of God. They reckon it'll be about a month, maybe 2, before this place is handed back to the people for worship. And what happened here is destined to be passed down the ages, along with all the other acts of religious intolerance that blacken history. This country will move on, like others darkened by fanatics. And the fervent hope is that the trauma of 1 week ago will unite Sri Lanka rather than divide it.
Clive Myrie there reporting from Sri Lanka. Simon Bridges' leadership will be in the spotlight tomorrow when National MPs return to Parliament from a 2-week break. Speaking on RNZ this morning, Mr Bridges said after attending a regional conference at the weekend, the clear message from supporters was the need for the caucus to be disciplined and unified. National has polled just above 40% in the last 2 major political polls, but Simon Bridges' preferred Prime Minister ratings has been woeful compared to Jacinda Ardern. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, joins us now. Hi Jane, so the MPs are back in the capital tomorrow. Is there any real danger to Simon Bridges' leadership?
Look, certainly not yet. There is dissatisfaction within some members of the caucus about his style of leadership and also what some see as missteps, and that includes calling the leak inquiry last year and then more recently his handling of the petition that National Party ended up removing, the UN Compact on Migration Compact, and his description of a staffer as an emotional junior staffer. So there have been a series of events and incidents which haven't gone down necessarily that great well with the caucus, but they're going to come back for their regular caucus meeting here tomorrow at Parliament after a 2-week break, and I'm not hearing anything at the moment that would suggest a direct challenge. But look, there could well be talk about his leadership and part of that, the broader caucus and how they are thinking about him or responding to him. Now, on RNZ this morning, he was asked about a report in which he said that he was going to deliver a strong message about discipline and unity to the caucus. And when our interviewer asked him about that, he said, look, he disputed that interpretation, and that was very much the message that he got from members at a regional conference over the weekend, that the caucus and MPs really needed to come together if they were going to challenge the government and be successful in 2020. Now, one name that does keep popping up as a possible replacement is Judith Collins, and of course she was a former leadership contender in the last contest when Bill English stepped down, and has also popped up in those preferred Prime Minister stakes, which has prompted a bit of media speculation, which then creates its own kind of talk and chatter. Now, this morning he was asked if he trusted Judith Collins on a couple of occasions. He said that he trusted his colleagues but would not say that he trusted Judith Collins, which is interesting in itself. But look, MPs are going to be really weighing up the pros and cons of replacing Mr Bridges as leader, and actually whether the time in the electoral cycle is right if the majority of them do get to a point where they decide that he should go.
Well, it's interesting when they talk about a clear message from supporters that there's a need for the caucus to be disciplined and unified. Has there been any behaviour that you would point out where you say, well, that wasn't particularly disciplined and they didn't look unified there?
Look, not overt behaviour, but this is what we see in leadership challenges. So you have some MPs talking to the media, you have some MPs who are very disciplined. People haven't been speaking out specifically and publicly against Simon Bridges, but this is what we start to see. You start to see destabilisation campaigns, but also there is definitely a sense of unhappiness about some of his style. So you kind of put that all together and it doesn't always then add up to a leadership challenge. However, there's definitely a sense that he is up against a brick wall and the polling is going to be really important in this. So National has maintained a pretty good party vote polling above 40%, which is decent. It's good for an opposition party. And there's a debate about whether you put too much emphasis on that preferred Prime Minister stakes. I mean, opposition leaders are traditionally much, much lower than the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the status of the office. They often have a much more positive role. The role of the opposition leader is often criticising and seen to be negative. So I don't think you can put too much on that, but it's the party polling. And that's what MPs will be looking at. And if that polling really starts to drop too much more into the 30s, that's when Mr Bridges is going to be in danger. At the moment, he's been shielded by that high party vote. But MPs start to look at it and they start to think, I could lose my seat. National was really starting to lose the potential to have any shot at the next election. And they'll also be weighing up, well, is it better the devil we know? Because will a new leader raise the party vote, or could it fall even further? Could they marginalise voters that we have at the moment? So these will all be questions that MPs are discussing among themselves that they're thinking about. But to be honest, National has another big problem, and that it doesn't have any allies. It doesn't have any future or obvious support partners come 2020. And a change of leadership is not going to change that problem for them.
Yeah, interesting. When you mentioned there about the question that it was Guy Espiner on Morning Report who was asking him whether he trusted Judith Collins, and as you said, he dodged that one, saying he trusted his colleagues. Did he do himself a disservice there by not giving a very direct answer?
I think if there's any ill will among the caucus, then statements like that probably don't help. Now, he would have, seen himself as giving a broad answer, but if you ask direct questions generally, especially about a senior colleague, you either, make a direct statement or you fudge it, as I saw him doing this morning. And as I said, it feeds into, if there is ill will or if there is resentment, that sort of approach can inflame feelings. But look, it's all part of the political roundabout, and as I said, we get into this cycle when you have the leadership. Words become very, very important, and tomorrow MPs will be asked questions about whether there is discipline, whether there is unity in the caucus, and as we've seen before, everyone is fully behind the leader, everyone's disciplined, everyone's unified until there is a spill, and then it all sort of tends to come out a bit more publicly, but we're not at that point yet.
Any word from Judith Collins?
No, not yet. We'll talk to her tomorrow, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jane. That is Jane Patterson joining us there from Parliament, our political editor, speaking there about whether there is actually any leadership rumblings within the National Party. They will return back from 2 weeks holiday tomorrow. It is about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program today. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And what could be a first for a New Zealand secondary school, 400 students at a Lower Hutt college will now receive free lunches every day. A pilot program launched today by a canteen company at Taita College offers students sandwiches or burgers, fruit and yoghurt. Its chief executive, Johannes Tezer, is so sick of waiting for politicians to step up. He's funded the project himself. And as for the kids, they are stoked. They no longer have to fork out on food. Mediana Johnson reports.
It's the first day of Term 2 and the canteen is packed with students looking to pick up their first free lunch. One student had already eaten her free meal at interval.
It was nice as I had a burger and a muffin. Yum. Yeah. I was falling asleep in class because I was hungry. Oh. And then I ate my lunch and then I went to class, done all my work.
The school canteen is run by Libel Group, who operates across 82 schools. People can already donate a lunch to a student in need through the Text My Lunch scheme. But all students at Taita will now receive a free sandwich or burger, yoghurt, piece of fruit, muffin and milk or water. Libel Group's chief executive, Johannes Teiser, says the venture is a risk, but eventually he wants to feed every secondary school student through Text My Lunch.
We don't have to wait for a government to get their ear into gear and fix stuff. We can just do it ourselves, and that's what we're doing. The only thing that I'm a bit concerned about is that I'm personally paying for this initial project myself. So it's all hands on the pump now to try to get partners on board to actually give us a hand to pay for it.
Mr Teiser estimates it will cost close to $500,000 to feed every student at Taita. While he's yet to receive financial backing, he says someone's got to do something.
Feeding our future doctors and ambulance drivers and so forth.
Mr Teiser says Taita College was chosen because students weren't using the canteen and were skipping school to buy food elsewhere. The school principal, Karen Morgan, says it was an opportunity she couldn't refuse.
Whatever school I worked in, my ultimate goal would be to provide every student with a really healthy, nutritious lunch every day would be an optimum dream of mine, and it's happened. That's so brilliant.
While she says everyone knows that good food helps students succeed, they can now prove it by monitoring the effects of the program to see if it makes a difference to students' performance.
Through this initiative, I believe we can start looking at the stats around attendance, around improved attendance potentially, around improved grades, around improved participation in groups and activities and things that are going on at school and within Taita College.
Students who say they were reluctant to buy food from the old canteen because it was expensive were given a say in the new menu. But students like Josiah Lyford didn't expect it would be paid for.
Well, it was actually quite a shock at first, because here we are thinking, oh, we'll have to pay for all these different meals, but you gift it to us for free so that we can help learn into class.
Another student, Brent Rikiriki, says the free lunch will mean he can focus in class better.
Because when I'm in class, I'm like always hungry. I'm like, I can't wait until morning tea, I can buy me some food. Or can't wait until lunch, because I'm really hungry. But now I can just get it when morning tea or lunch.
The Ministry of Education could not say whether this program was the only on offer in the country, but the Principals Association says it would be uncommon for a college to offer every student a free lunch. For Checkpoint, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
There's been airport chaos in Australia today after the country's entire electronic passport and border security system went down. The problem affected both inbound and outbound passengers at all international terminals. The issue now seems to have fixed, but as the ABC's Isabel Rowe reports, thousands were forced to stand in long queues as they waited to be processed.
Travellers checking in at Brisbane International Terminal this morning had to join the back of a queue that was hundreds of metres long. At one point, it was out the front door.
3/4 of an hour, 45 minutes, hasn't been too bad, yeah.
Well, the queues were way up there earlier, along there and back round, so they are
only letting
smaller.
flights through that are leaving in the next hour or so. The queue will start mounting up again.
Do you know what time your flight is?
I don't know, because they just told me to line up here.
Looks like some people are going ahead of us because their flights are leaving well before us, so we're just taking it easy and we'll see how we go.
Delays at Sydney International Airport were longer. Stressful for some, but others were able to take it in their stride.
Probably about an hour.
An hour?
It was a bit tiring, a bit stressful, but that's okay. Yeah, they were good. They were very slick. They did really well.
Australian Border Force says a national IT outage at international terminals means passports are being checked manually. Queensland man Cameron arrived in Brisbane this morning to an obvious issue.
All the machines were open and off. The monitors were open and it looked like a technical issue. So we just had to wait in line, probably about my guess would be 400 or 500 people at that stage.
A spokesman for Border Force says it sent additional staff to airports, including Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, to help process passengers and to minimise delays. Brisbane Airport spokeswoman Leonie van der Ven says the outage came at one of the worst times for an international airport.
We've got a significant amount of people both trying to get into the country or out of the country in this 4-hour period.
Meanwhile, weary commuters are looking at the upside of being foiled by computers.
You can't really argue with IT issues, can you, when they say it's an IT problem? You just there's no one to get angry at.
And that was a disrupted airport customer across the Tasman, ending Isabel Rowe's report. For the first time in more than 200 years, a Japanese emperor is about to step down. Tomorrow, Emperor Akihito will enter a ceremonial room in the Imperial Palace in Tokyo and formally give up his throne. Under Japan's constitution, emperors are not allowed to retire, so the government has had to pass a special one-off law to allow him to do so. Here's the BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes from Tokyo.
In a lush forest on the western outskirts of Tokyo, the Japanese emperor is on a final, solemn mission. Standing before the vast tomb of his father, 85-year-old Emperor Akihito has come to tell him that he is relinquishing the throne. Outside, crowds have gathered with shouts of banzai as the emperor and empress pass.
This is one of the very last public appearances that the Emperor and Empress will make before the abdication. And huge numbers of people who've turned out here this morning, thousands of them, for this last opportunity to see the Emperor and Empress in public. It gives you a real sense of the genuine love and affection and respect that is felt for people here for Emperor Akihito, and gratitude for the way that he's carried out this very difficult role over the past 31 years.
They do so much good for the country. You see them in the news doing this and that for the good of the people. And it really takes you here. I think that's why.
I'm not from the generation that experienced the war. But the emperor is the one that has kept the peace in Japan throughout his reign. So I wanted to come and see him to show my gratitude. I wanted to tell him thank you.
Quiet and modest he may be, but in his 31 years on the throne, Akihito has revolutionized the Japanese monarchy, comforting people in times of disaster and distress, and reaching out the hand of reconciliation to the countries Japan invaded and brutalized under his father.
Akihito's a huge figure, and so he created a new role for the emperor, and that was as the nation's chief emissary of reconciliation, crisscrossing the region, making gestures of atonement and contrition, remarks of remorse, basically trying to heal the scars of the wartime past.
At 85, Akihito is now increasingly frail. For nearly a decade, he has been pushing to hand the throne to his son. On Wednesday, he will get that wish, and Crown Prince Naruhito will become the 126th Emperor of Japan.
That was Rupert Wingfield-Hayes. Now, power is out to more than 4,000 households across Christchurch and Banks Peninsula. Orion Energy says nearly 1,000 homes are without power in Horswell, Hornby, Islington, Prebleton and Templeton areas, while homes in Pigeon Bay, Akaroa and Barry's Bay are also affected, among some of the other areas. There are also reports of surface flooding on a number of roads in Christchurch, and motorists are being told to take extreme care. Let's go back to our story earlier about the junior doctor strike. They have walked off the job for 5 days, and we know that thousands of appointments have been cancelled. We're getting some feedback from you on that. This person says, my dad was supposed to have hip surgery in February. That was delayed till March, delayed till April, and now postponed indefinitely. He is in constant pain and can hardly move around, and his life is miserable. Good on you, doctors, always putting your patients first, says this person. And this in from Sally. Sally says, my surgery has been cancelled 6 times at very short notice since January 2019 because of the strikes, and pre-admission tests are repeated with each delay. Communication from the DHB has been extremely poor. Mail has been sent to the wrong addresses and GP and posted after the actual appointment dates have passed. It is farcical, she says. Every day I look in the mailbox for a letter with a new date, but there is nothing. How does a patient plan and make arrangements for recovery care? I would never want a striking doctor caring for me, says Sally. Where is the professionalism? The entire financial performance of the DHB needs a rocket blasting it back to reality. And she goes on to say, get rid of the bullying, entitled attitude of staff. What is all of this costing? Remember, the same situation occurred just 2 years ago when these doctors also activated strikes. Thanks, Sally, for your email. And we are going to have more after 6 o'clock on the strike situation. They're off for 5 days. Mondays, we're told, is the busiest day for the hospitals, and that more of the junior doctors turned up this morning, than they had actually expected. And the DHBs, well, they can't tell us exactly how much this is costing. We have asked them because the senior doctors have to do extended duties, and they're paid significantly more per hour than the junior doctors. So we'll bring you all those details when we speak after 6 o'clock to Anne Aitchison, who is the National Contingency Planner for the DHBs.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The head doctor at Wellington Regional Hospital says he worries about stress and tiredness among staff covering for junior doctors. Thousands of members of the Resident Doctors Association walked off public hospital wards today, except in Canterbury, in a long employment row with their bosses. It's their 5th strike since mid-January and the longest at 5 days. The Chief Medical Officer at Wellington's Capital and Coast DHB, John Tate, says many staff members are filling in and doing duties normally done by junior doctors.
I think the biggest challenge we have is how our staff who are doing all this extra work, and that's not just senior medical officers or the RMOs who are working, but it's nursing, allied health, administrative staff, how they're going to feel towards the end of the week.
John Tate says patients will be safe, but the added workload may be hard for some to sustain. Neighbours and 3 schools in Tokoroa are mourning the loss of a local family following yesterday's road smash on State Highway 1, in which 8 people died. One man says the victims were a lovely and very polite family with young children that lived next door to him. Ivan Myers says the couple and their 7 children, some of them preschoolers, moved to the town just a few months ago. The Tokoroa primary, intermediate and high schools have confirmed their pupils were involved in the crash. They say it's a tragic accident that has affected the whole community. The names of those who died have not been released by the police or the schools. 7 people died in one vehicle, as did the sole occupant of the other, who has been confirmed as a long-time Scouts New Zealand staff member. The government has freed up an extra $16 million for Statistics New Zealand in the May budget in an effort to avoid problems with the next census in 2023. Statistics New Zealand has been under political pressure to deliver a complete and valid census from last year's data after moving it online. There have been unprecedented delays due to a low turnout in which nearly 1 in 7 people did not complete Census 2018. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Stats needs money to cover extra costs it incurred last year and to make sure future surveys are robust.
While it's positive that Stats have been able to combine data from the lower than anticipated participation in the 2018 census with administrative data that's held about people in other government agencies like birth records to get us to this point today, it is, however, an experience that I would certainly not call an ideal scenario.
Jacinda Ardern. Stats New Zealand will begin releasing data from September 23rd. And the Prime Minister has condemned the leader of Destiny Church, Brian Tamaki, as irresponsible, accusing him of inciting violence in the prison system. The church has repeatedly demanded demanded access to prisons and funding for their rehabilitation program Man Up. But the government says it has never received a formal application. Mr Tamaki this morning tweeted a warning saying the church would plan private visits with inmates to introduce Man Up and cause revolts in every prison. Jacinda Ardern told reporters the comments were concerning.
I do think it's irresponsible to try and incite violence in the prison system because you're not getting your way.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. Power is out to more than 4,000 households across Christchurch and Banks Peninsula. Orion says nearly 1,000 homes are without power in the Hallswell, Hornby, Islington, Prebleton and Templeton area. Homes in Pigeon Bay, Tokoroa and Barry's Bay are also affected, among other areas. Late this afternoon, a sudden heavy downpour caused flooding on multiple roads around Christchurch. Motorists are being urged to take extra care. The worst of the weather is forecast to blow over early this evening. A Queenstown Lakes District Councillor has welcomed discussion about the future of the resort town's airport. Two urban planners will outline their plans to relocate Queenstown Airport and redevelop the area at a public meeting tonight. It follows strong opposition to the airport's plans to double flights in and out of the resort town late last year. Councillor Alexa Forbes says these types of blue sky thinking plans need to be considered with an open mind.
I'm really pleased with the level of engagement. The community has really engaged around this issue. They are, I think, really upset at the thought of having to make way for more noise and more airport activity.
Alexa Forbes. The Calvin Peninsula and Frankton Community Association will host the meeting from 8 p.m. at the Remarkables Primary School. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The National Rugby League has admitted its referees got it wrong in awarding Melbourne a decisive penalty in the Storm's 13-12 Anzac Day win over the Warriors. The Warriors were penalised for holding on to Storm prop Jesse Bromwich in the play, which allowed the Storm to even up the scores before kicking the winning field goal. But the NRL says a scrum should have been called because Bromwich did not play the ball correctly and Cam Smith knocked on. The All Blacks and Crusaders prop Owen Franks will spend another 4 weeks on the sidelines due to a shoulder injury. Franks hasn't played for the table-topping Crusaders since their win over the Brumbies earlier this month, but the franchise says the 106-test veteran doesn't require surgery. And after spending most of last year recovering from a serious spinal infection, former All Black Adam Thompson is returning to professional rugby. The 37-year-old loose forward has signed with the Utah Warriors in the United States. Football Ferns coach Tom Samani has named an experienced squad to travel to the FIFA Women's World Cup in France in June. The 23-strong squad includes 17 players who competed at the 2015 World Cup. Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk has been named the Professional Footballers Association's Players Player of the Year in English Premier. And the New Zealand cyclist Sarah Walker has finished 5th in the final at the BMX World Cup meet in Manchester. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dana Johansson looks at the weekend's sport with a bit of a focus on the fluctuating fortunes of some Kiwis competing in Australia. We look at the link between LSD and at least one theoretical physicist, and Eunice Bendixson, who travelled the world for 3 years photographing men who claimed to be the next Messiah. Well, most of them were men. One was transgender. It's on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from Afternoon News at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taumaranui and Taupo. Showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms in Waikato and Waitomo, clearing in most places overnight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, but showers spreading north overnight tonight. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape and Wairarapa. Showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Southerly gales this evening, gusting to 100 kilometres an hour in Wellington and Wairarapa. Showers and strong southerlies easing tomorrow. For Nelson, Buller and Westland, remaining showers clearing this evening and becoming fine. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain and southerly gales with snow to 900 metres, clearing in most places overnight. Fiordland, Otago and Southland, showers with snow to 800 metres, retreating to the south coast tomorrow morning. Fine in western Fiordland. Chatham Islands, periods of rain easing to showers tomorrow. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It will take months to catch up on the thousands of surgeries and appointments cancelled due to a 5-day junior doctors' strike that started today. Members of the Resident Doctors Association have walked off the job at all public hospitals except Canterbury due to an ongoing clash with the district health boards over their employment agreement and rostering. I asked the DHB's National Contingency Planner, Anne Aitchison, how things are going so far at the hospitals.
Plans have been developed over a 2-week period, and at this point in time, each of the DHBs is managing well.
So no incidents of concern so far?
Not at this stage, no.
So, well, you don't need the junior doctors then, it would seem.
I don't think you could make that assumption.
So how long could you sustain this situation for?
I don't think anyone would be able to answer that question either. We plan in terms of the number of staff we believe will be at work, and those who are working additional hours. There's obviously a limit to how long additional hours can be worked.
So how much pressure does a 5-day strike place on you?
Significant pressure on the DHBs.
So can you be more specific? In what way? How?
As I described, when you have to ask people to work additional hours or do jobs they're less familiar with, it always places extra pressure on people. And when you have a workforce that isn't at work and other people doing their job, the unfamiliarity creates issues and problems for everyone.
Can you give us an actual example of that, Anne? What is a job that someone may be doing today that they will be unfamiliar with?
If you think about a charge nurse on a ward who normally has several junior doctors working, and those doctors aren't there are less people for that charge nurse to call on, and they don't normally prescribe the drugs, or they are not the people who make the discharge decisions or discharge the patients home. That charge nurse is under pressure to provide support she doesn't normally have to provide. And for the person doing that, even someone who doesn't normally complete the data into the computer, it's just work with which they're unfamiliar.
That sounds dangerous rather than unfamiliar.
We plan to ensure there are sufficient people to provide the support. So if you're talking about data entry, there are additional people available to provide that support. The purpose of a contingency plan is to mitigate all of those risks, and we've been planning for this for weeks now.
So how many extra staff do you have on as a result of this?
Once we have a strike in our sites, a lot of our elective services are cancelled. So people who potentially would have been running clinics today aren't running those clinics. They're working in the wards today. People who would have been in reception in clinics will be working somewhere differently. So we reallocate staff to ensure that the work that has to be done in the hospital is done in the hospital.
So how many staff have you reallocated then?
Oh, I couldn't answer that question.
You must know that. You're the contingency planner. Surely that would be a vital piece of information. Give us a ballpark.
No, I'm the national contingency planner. At each district health board, the planners there, the planning teams, reallocate staff as they need to.
So you don't have, nobody has an overview?
I have an overview of the management of the risks. I don't count the numbers of staff we reallocate. That will change. Those staff will move from place to place. That will change on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis.
So if you have an overview of risk management then, what would place any DHB under pressure? What is the situation that could place you under significant pressure during this strike period?
Anything that would place us under significant pressure has been covered by our plan or by the requests of the union to provide us support under the legislation's life-preserving services agreements.
So this isn't... That suggests that this is not disruptive at all in any way.
It is disruptive. We have cancelled patients' care, elective services, outpatient appointments. All of those kind of things have been cancelled.
And how many of those surgeries and outpatient appointments have been cancelled?
Thousands.
How long does it take you to catch up thousands of appointments?
Again, that varies from District Health Board to District Health Board, but it will take months.
So will you be doing anything to catch those up, like more super clinics?
And there's a number, again, each DHB does things differently. There will be extra surgical sessions run, there will be extra clinics run in order to assist with the recovery.
Can you say that there have been no, life-threatening or life-altering consequences of these surgeries being put off or not scheduled at all?
I can't answer that question for you. That's a question for a clinician to answer, but they make the decisions in terms of what's happening.
So it's possible that some patients' health could be the worse for this?
There's always a risk associated with any withdrawal of labour in a public hospital.
So what is the actual cost of this strike? And by this I do mean actual dollars, because you're having to pay senior doctors additional fees, are you not, as a consequence of this?
I'm a contingency planner. I can't answer those questions.
But those senior doctors will be part of your contingency. You'll be expecting them to cover. So are they not part of your planning process?
Of course they're part of the planning process. That's not the question you asked me. You asked me what the cost was. The cost is not a question for a contingency planner. I can't help you with that.
So when you do contingency planning as cost no object, you just make the contingency plan?
We have to develop the plan to ensure that those people who've got no choice but to be in hospital get the care they need.
So, Anne, just to be clear, when you make the contingency plan, there are no budget constraints on you, you're just told to make this work, whatever it costs?
The DHBs must make it work.
What is your biggest concern during this period?
I think that's a difficult question for me to answer, given that I'm conscious that hospitals are places where every day different and new things happen. I think my biggest concern would be that the hospitals continue at high occupancy so that the demand on staff is very high.
So is not one of your biggest concerns patient safety during this time?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because the more patients we have in the hospital who cannot get care anywhere else, then the higher the concerns about safety are.
And that was the National Contingency Planner for the DHBs, Anne Aitchison. Thousands of houses are without power tonight across Christchurch and Banks Peninsula. Multiple suburbs have been affected. Linda McGregor is a spokesperson for Orion and she's on the phone now. Good evening, Linda. Can you just bring us up to date with the situation? Which areas are affected?
Hi, Lisa. Yes, we have had about 11 faults, individual faults, across the region. Banks Peninsula has been hardest hit, but we've also had faults occur in Brooklands, Hornby, Lincoln, Springston, Horsell, Taitap, and Mount Pleasant and Sumner. Now, initially we had 4,084 customers without power, but we've been able to get that number down to around 3,000 with power being restored in some places.
So when you say 11 faults, what do you mean exactly? What's caused this?
Well, it's the weather. It's very windy and very wet in Christchurch. There's a front going through. Thankfully, that front would seem to be passing, so the wind speed is dropping, and the number of faults that we're having recorded has stabilised. So it's it's the wet, it's the wind, and it's also what we find in these situations, vegetation thrashing around in the wind that collides with our lines and causes havoc there. So, vegetation's been identified in a couple of areas, but we're still under investigation in others.
So, Linda, what speeds has the wind got up to down there this evening or this afternoon? Do you know?
Well, I'm not sure the total wind speeds. Would it be? I'm looking at our website. Customers can check there, but it looks like, I don't know, 80. But somebody else who knows more about that would probably be able to give you more.
Is that how vulnerable the network is, where we have a sort of a moderately severe storm and the power is out to about 4,000 homes?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, wind does put the network in jeopardy, particularly when there's a lot of vegetation near lines. But this has been particularly intense over a short period of time. So I wouldn't say it's something that we routinely experience. But depending on the weather, it is something that goes with the territory with this kind of weather. Something like this hasn't occurred here for some months.
So
it's pretty rare.
Can customers all expect to be back on this evening, or what's the situation?
Yeah, we'd very much like for that to be the case, but we think possibly we won't be able to restore power to everyone. With 11 individual faults and 11 individual sites where we have to fix the network, it may be that some customers might have to be prepared to be without power overnight. What they can do is get in touch with our contact centre, and they'll be given more up-to-date information as the evening passes. We're concentrating our efforts with all crews on deck on those areas where the largest numbers of customers are affected.
So that contact centre, will they get someone on the other end of the phone? It's not an automated system?
They will get a real live person on the phone, most definitely. We pride ourselves on that. And the number for that is 0800 363 9898.
So what is the situation then this evening? Have you got extra crews? Is the weather still posing problems in terms of getting those crews fixing those faults?
No, we have called in extra crews and we've called in extra contractors to help us. So all hands on deck, and our crews are out there in the field right now. It's every effort is being made to restore power to as many people as possible.
But you still don't anticipate that everyone will be back on tonight, despite that?
With 11 faults, and depending on the complexity of the individual faults, we feel that potentially there is the possibility of us not being able to get round to all of them and restore power to everyone. So
Linda,
I think...
Sorry to interrupt, but do you know how many houses are likely to be without power overnight?
Oh, it's pretty difficult to tell at this point. We'll be monitoring the situation as the evening progresses, and our crews make real progress with fixing faults. So I'm happy to give you an update later on as we get things restored.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Linda McGregor, who's the spokesperson for Orion. As you heard her say there's a significant number of houses in Banks Peninsula and Christchurch without power. Started off at 4,000 and they've got it down to about 3,000. But they are saying that some of those households likely to have to suffer through the night without power. A beautiful family with very well-behaved children. That's how the neighbour of a family involved in a deadly car accident in Taupo at the weekend have been described by a neighbour. Ivan Myers says the couple and their 7 children, some as young as preschoolers, moved to Tokoroa just a few months ago. He told our reporter Andrew McRae the woman and her partner were planning to get married next month.
Very friendly, yeah. Couldn't get better neighbours. I said to her, coming here from another town, I say, if you want to know anything, or if you need any help, if you're unsure, or if I can help you, let me know. And she said, oh, thank you very much. I haven't said that, thank you very much. And she said, but I got 7 kids, she said, I can't do much for you. I said, you don't have to do much for me,
So I'm talking about the young boy mowing your lawns?
That is that one who's in hospital, I think, 9 years. And he was a nice, very, very polite kid, nice kids. And I said to him, I said, do you mow lawns? He said, yes. I said, I might get you to mow my lawn. It can make you a bit of pocket money.
So you'll miss them around?
Yeah, they were nice people, very nice, very friendly. We often, when we was hanging the busing, or when I walked out to the road to the post box and she was there, we always had a bit of a yep, Yeah, very friendly people, nice people. And when in the school holidays too, the kids around the place there, you wouldn't think there was kids there, so well behaved. And I saw it for the last, yesterday and today, whether there be no way, I don't know. And I saw the curtains are still closed, you look here at the bedrooms, And I thought, they might have... And the washing was still on the line there, so I don't know whether she'd been away with the kids. I don't know. I haven't talked to her more than a week.
Well, yesterday they were travelling back
to Tokoroa.
So they may have been away.
They might have been away, I would say, but coming back at 10 o'clock in the morning, it happened at 10 o'clock, I think they said, yeah.
A Maori family?
Yeah, well, partly Maori, yeah. Very nice people, yeah. When they told me this morning, I cried.
Very sad. Such a waste of young lives.
Yeah.
It's a real tragedy for the town, 7 people, lots of young people gone.
It is. For a nice family like that, They kept it beautiful and they were very friendly and yeah.
That is Ivan Myers, who was talking to our reporter Andrew McRae. In Spain, the governing socialists have claimed victory in the country's third election in 4 years. The party of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez won 29% of the vote and will need other parties to form a coalition. The election has also been marked by a surge in support for the hard-right party Vox. It captured 10% of the vote and means for the first time since military rule ended in the 1970s that a far-right party will enter Parliament. The BBC's James Reynolds filed this report from Madrid.
This is what relief looks like. In the centre of Madrid, Spain's socialists celebrated their victory. Their leader, the pro-European Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, saw off a conservative opposition which included a rising movement from the far right.
We made it happen. The Socialist Party has won the election, and in doing so, the future has won and the past has lost.
Pedro Sanchez argued during the campaign that he was the only Spanish leader capable of stopping the advance of the hard right. And the numbers show that he has done so. He must now form a lasting coalition of his own.
The far-right party Vox, the first significant movement of its kind since the end of General Franco's fascist regime 4 decades ago, ended up on the losing side. But they did win enough votes to enter Parliament in opposition. By contrast, the winners, Pedro Sanchez and the Socialist Party, will continue to lead this country, probably in partnership with a number of smaller left-wing and regional parties. The exact shape of the new administration may take weeks to decide.
And that was James Reynolds reporting from Madrid. Boeing is holding its annual shareholder meeting in Chicago later today, where the chief executive is expected to face some tough questions from shareholders and the media. The company is battling a crisis over the grounding of its 737 MAX plane, which followed 2 fatal crashes, one in Ethiopia and the other in Indonesia. Family and friends of one of the victims of the Ethiopian Airlines crash will hold a silent protest outside the meeting. Here's the BBC's Chia Robinson.
For the man at the helm of Boeing, the shareholder meeting will be no ordinary one. Dennis Muilenburg, the chairman, president and chief executive of the world's biggest commercial plane maker, is fighting to salvage his company's reputation and public confidence in the 737 jet, Boeing's most profitable plane. The jet has been grounded around the world since mid-March after 2 fatal crashes. The most recent, the Ethiopian Airlines crash last month that killed everyone on board. Boeing is working around the clock on a software fix, but the firm is under intense scrutiny from customers, regulators, shareholders and passengers. Southwest Airlines is the largest global carrier, flying 737 MAX aircraft. It's reported Boeing did not inform the airline that a safety feature had been deactivated. Meanwhile, pilots at American Airlines claim Boeing's training program, aimed at helping pilots understand the MCAS system that played a role in both crashes, does not go far enough. A fall in 737 deliveries has caused revenues to fall by $1 billion. And Boeing said last week it did not know how the crisis would affect its fortunes going forward.
And that was Chair Robertson reporting there. And we've got some time now for your feedback, quite a bit of it coming in on various things that we've been discussing today. First of all, the road toll, and it's been a terrible road toll for the month. This person says, "Hi there, after the horrendous April road toll, I am looking forward to RNZ tackling this serious issue with in-depth analysis. It is a dreadful slaughter, nearly the same number as the mosque attacks in 1 month alone. We need an urgent public debate regarding speed limits and accident risks." The other thing we've been talking about today is the junior doctors who have walked off the job for 5 days, their longest strike yet. Contingency plans are in place, but thousands, they say, the DHB say thousands of surgeries and appointments have had to be put off as a consequence. And this person is saying, ask the DHBs how many patients are waiting more than 4 months for surgery, in particular orthopaedic surgery. Some are constraining the flow at outpatients, so ask them how many patients are waiting more than 4 months for a first specialist appointment. Years of reducing wait lists is going down the drain, this person says. And the other one is, the irony is, Davey says, a senior doctor is on a higher rate of pay and is earning overtime due to a junior doctor striking. Bravo, cancelled and rescheduled ops and perhaps even loss of life, says Davey. Auckland DHB will pay $500 an hour to consultants covering the striking doctors for overtime hours. Bloody unbelievable, says this person. And then this one, can we hear more of the issues and pressures that caused the junior doctors to strike and fewer uninformed, albeit well-meaning opinions from selected texts? I'm not sure whether that one was a text or an email. And then on the 501s, these are the people deported from Australia back to New Zealand and rising rate of crime within that group. Calling them 501 only helps to mythologise a bunch of gang members. Good for ratings though, says Michael. And just before we go on Simon Bridges, whether there's an expectation of, well, a test to his leadership. This person says Simon Bridges is suffering from what Andrew Little, etc. opposition leaders. When Teflon John was PM, Jacinda has sucked all the oxygen. Deja vu. What goes around comes around. And Gary says Simon must stop acting like the big tough guy. That's all we've got time for this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Check our stories out online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The head doctor at Wellington Hospital says he worries about stress among the staff members covering for junior doctors during their 5-day strike. The Tokoroa community is mourning the loss of a family killed in an horrific crash north of Taupo over the weekend. The government is putting an extra $16 million into Stats NZ after problems with the last census saw just one in 7 people filling out their forms. And the Prime Minister has accused Destiny Church's Brian Tamaki of inciting violence in the prison system. Those are the headlines. We'll have our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
What's motivating me against these bottling plants is that any kind of action against climate change needs to be local action.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
So I got made fun of, right? But it was fine. It was the type of making fun of where